It's officially deadline day. We got some deals pouring in. Now, these deals happened yesterday. Brendan Smith was traded to the New York Rangers, and Brian Boyle is now a member of the Toronto Maple Leafs. Now, the trade went down like this yesterday. Traded from the Detroit Red Wings to the New York Rangers for a second-round pick in the 2017 draft and a third-round pick in the 2018 draft. Throwing this into the trade simulation in NHL 17, for some reason, the Rangers don't have a 2017 second-round pick. I don't know how they acquired it, so I went ahead and I threw in the 2018 pick. For some reason, it's just not there, so I threw in the 2018 second and the 2018 third, and I'm sending this from Detroit to the New York Rangers, and they say, no, your offer is woefully insufficient. Now, I sent the exact same thing from the Rangers to the Wings, and of course, they're going to say yes, the trade value is very much in the Wings' favor. Now, I don't know a ton about Brendan Smith. He kind of flies under the radar. He was a former first-round pick in 2007. Pretty big guy, 6'2", 211 pounds. Have a look at his stats here. He has 5 points in 33 games this year. His career high being 19 points, ended up hitting that in 2013-2014. So to me, he looks like a bottom four defenseman. Not that that's a bad thing, but paying a second and a third round pick for him is pretty steep. The market is really high right now, so I guess it's really no surprise that it cost him a second and a third. Kind of a cool fact here, Brendan Smith is being reunited with two former players he played at the University of Wisconsin with, that being New York Rangers captain Ryan McDonough and Derek Stepan. So kind of a cool little reunion there. I think that the Rangers really lost out on Shattenkirk, so I guess this is some sort of a consolation prize. He's really not a game breaker, but he's still a steady defenseman to have. If I had to give the winner of this deal, it's got to be Detroit. They're not making the postseason this year. Might as well offload some assets, start building for the future. Again, I like it for both teams. I like the bottom pairing guy in Brendan Smith, but I do like the draft pick, so I'm going to go ahead and give a thumbs up to the Detroit Red Wings. The Leafs made a big splash, and when I mean big, I mean actually big. They acquired a big dude in Brian Boyle for Byron Frais and a 2017 second round pick. Now, I love this trade for Toronto. I'll explain why in a few minutes here, but Brian Boyle going to Toronto, we're going to put it into the trade simulation from Toronto, going to Tampa Bay, and they say no. They don't want anything to do with this. So Brian Boyle listed at 6'6" in the game. Some sites have him at 6'7". There's no denying he is a big center presence there. Now, going from Tampa Bay to Toronto, they also say no. So both sides reject this in the simulation for NHL 17. Kind of weird how that worked out. Now, I love players like Brian Boyle. See, this site has him at 6'7", almost 250 pounds, so he's a tank. I love players like this. I'm a big Brian Boyle fan, and he's put up points in the past. For a big guy, he's put up close to 40 points. That's pretty impressive after spending the last 4 years with the Tampa Bay Lightning, pretty much averaging about 15 goals per year, which is awesome. Now, if Toronto can use him in a third-line role, I think that it's honestly the best move that Toronto could have made. I think this was a fantastic deal for a few reasons. Brian Boyle has played in 2 Stanley Cup finals, and you see here, most playoff games since 2010-2011, Brian Boyle leads the entire NHL in most playoff games since then. So he's got 100 playoff games of experience. That's crazy. Followed by Hagelin, Sharp, and Strawman. Now, this guy pretty much says exactly how I feel. He says, Boyle is a nice fit for a young Leafs room. 2 Cup finals since 2014, a really nice fourth line center option, and the Leafs have ammo to do it. Now, whether it's the third line or the fourth line, no matter what, I have to give the thumbs up here to Toronto. Yeah, they gave up a decent player and a second round pick, but honestly, this is a great move for Toronto. A second round pick for a guy, there's not many players that are as big and as big of a presence as him. You know, he's a good locker room guy. I know a lot of guys like him in Tampa Bay and in New York when he spent some time there. So I love this trade for Toronto. They get the thumbs up for me. It was just a great move. Now, the last trade of this video is kind of a big one. It happened this morning. Thomas Vanek is going to the Florida Panthers, so they're gearing up for another playoff run. We're going to break it down here from Brandon Clack on Twitter. He says that the Red Wings deal Thomas Vanek to the Panthers for Dylan McIlwraith and a third round pick. Also, Detroit retains 50% of the salary. cheap, cheap, cheap. So we're gonna throw this into the simulation. We got Thomas Vanek here listed at 86 overall, has a pretty decent amount of trade value. He is a good sniper in the game, and Dylan McIlraith, or Dylan McGrath, however you want to pronounce his name, he was a top 10 pick a few years ago. So sending this to Florida, they say absolutely yes, we'll take deals like this any day of the week. Now sending this the other way from Florida to Detroit with 50% of Thomas Vanek's cap being retained, they say no. Even though it took 50% off, the Wings do not want a third and a player who has highly been regarded as a bust. So one way says yes and the other says no. Now I'm not a huge Thomas Vanek fan. I liked him when he played with the Buffalo Sabres, put up really good numbers, but ever since then he's bounced around from a few other teams and he hasn't really been the same player. I'm not saying he's not a bad player at all, because that's not the case. I'm just not a big Thomas Vanek fan. This is some nice depth scoring for Florida though. Again, they're gearing up for another playoff run. Vanek will definitely help them. Florida Panthers, they like to go after old players at the deadline. They got Yuri Hudler a couple years ago, or last year. They got Jaromir Jagr. Seems like all the old guys like to go to Florida to end off their career, and I mean, rightfully so. It's a beautiful place. Vanek has 15 goals and 38 points through 48 games this season. Not bad numbers at all. He will be a UFA at the end of the season, so not a huge problem for Detroit to retain 50% of his cap. Going back to NHL Update on Twitter, he says not necessarily the analytical player you expect Florida to grab, but that price is laughably small. Now, a third round pick is a minimal amount to pay for a player who's still really good. You know, 38 points through 49 games or 48 games, that's not bad at all. Vancouver got a better return for Alex Burrows than Detroit did for Thomas Vanek, which is kind of strange because Vanek blows Burrows out of the water point-wise. So again, if I had to give a winner, had to give the big thumbs up, it's gotta be to Florida. Getting Thomas Vanek for a third round pick, I mean that's crazy. Plus, they retain 50% of the cap. I don't see how Florida does not win in this deal. Again, let me know what you think in the comments down below for all three of these trades. I'm going to try to break down the majority of them over the course of the trade deadline, but here's three pretty decent ones. I love the Boyle one, I didn't mind the Smith one, and I really like the Vanek one going to Florida. So let me know what you think in the comments down below, and I'll see you guys when the next trade drops.